The figure stumbled through the snow like a ghost made flesh, wrapped in threadbare cloth that whipped against the howling wind. From his cabin window, Jake Morrison watched the stranger collapse 20 yards from his door, a dark smudge against the endless white that stretched across the Wyoming territory. He'd seen plenty of folks die in blizzards like this. Most men would have stayed by their fire, said a prayer, and waited for spring to reveal another frozen corpse. But something about the way this one moved, small, deliberate, fighting every step, made Jake pull on his coat. The wind cut through him like a blade as he trudged toward the fallen figure. Snow had already begun to bury the stranger, and Jake could see death settling in, patient and cold. He knelt beside the motionless form, noting the delicate hands, the slight frame beneath the tattered wrappings. "You'll freeze out here," he muttered, more to himself than to whoever lay unconscious in the drift. Jake scooped the stranger into his arms, lighter than he'd expected, and carried them back toward the amber glow of his cabin. Inside, he laid the figure on his bed and began stoking the fire, adding log after log until the flames roared and heat filled the small space. Only then did he turn back to his unexpected guest. The stranger's breathing was shallow, lips blue with cold. Frost clung to the cloth wrapped around their head and face, and Jake knew that without warming, this person would die within the hour. He'd seen hypothermia before. It took folks quiet and gentle, like falling asleep. His hands hesitated at the edge of the cloth. In this territory, you didn't go unwrapping strangers without cause. But cause enough was lying half dead in his bed, and modesty wouldn't save a frozen soul. Jake pulled away the outer layer of tattered fabric, then the next, his weathered fingers working carefully around a face he couldn't yet see. The cloth was frozen in places, and he had to wait for it to thaw before continuing. Steam rose from the wet fabric as the heat reached it. One more layer. His hands moved to the final wrapping around the stranger's head. The cloth fell away. Jake's breath caught in his throat. His hands froze mid-motion, and for a long moment the only sound was the crackling fire and the wind battering his cabin walls. The face looking back at him, unconscious but unmistakable, belonged to someone he'd thought was dead for 15 years, Catherine Henley. Jake stumbled backward from the bed, his mind reeling. The last time he'd seen that face, it was streaked with tears and blood, framed by flames that consumed half of Willowbrook. She'd been 19 then. The banker's daughter promised to marry Jake's brother Thomas before the raids came, before everything burned, before Jake had left her for dead. Now she lay in his bed, 15 years older but unmistakable, the same dark hair, the same fine-boned features that had haunted his dreams. Only now her face was hollow with hunger, marked by years of hardship that had carved away the softness he remembered. Jake's hands shook as he poured whiskey from his bottle, downing it in one burning gulp. The smart thing, the safe thing would be to wrap her back up, carry her outside, and let the blizzard finish what it started. Catherine Henley was supposed to be dead. If she was alive, if she'd survived, she knew what really happened that night in Willowbrook. He looked at her again, noting the scars on her hands, the way her clothes hung loose on her frame. This wasn't the pampered banker's daughter who'd worn silk dresses and pearl buttons. This was someone who'd learned to survive, someone who'd been running for a very long time. Jake knelt beside the bed and felt for her pulse, weak but steady. Her skin was warming, color returning to her cheeks. She'd live, if he let her. The wind rattled his windows, and Jake thought about the life he'd built here. 3 years of peace, 3 years of folks in Copper Falls calling him a decent man, trading with him, trusting him. All of it built on the lie that Jake Morrison was just another drifter who'd settled down, not the man who'd burned Willowbrook to ash. Catherine stirred slightly, her lips parting. In her delirium, she whispered a single word, Thomas. Jake's brother's name hit him like a physical blow. Thomas, who'd died in the flames. Thomas, who'd never known that Jake had set them. Footsteps crunched through the snow outside, slow and deliberate. Jake moved to the window and peered through the frost-covered glass. 3 riders sat their horses in the storm, wrapped in heavy coats, watching his cabin. Even through the snow, he could see the glint of badges on their chests. The law had followed Catherine Henley to his door. Sheriff Bill Crenshaw's voice carried through the storm like thunder. "Morrison, we know you got someone in there." Jake pressed himself against the wall beside his window, mind racing. Crenshaw was persistent as a hunting dog and twice as mean. If he'd tracked Catherine here, it meant someone had seen her collapse, seen Jake carry her inside. In a territory where survival depended on neighbors helping neighbors, refusing to answer would mark him as guilty of something. "Morrison," Crenshaw called again, "we're looking for a woman. Dangerous fugitive. Goes by Catherine Henley, though she's used other names." Catherine's eyes fluttered open at the sound of her name. For a moment she stared at the cabin ceiling in confusion, then her gaze found Jake's face. Recognition hit her like lightning. Her eyes widened, her body tensed, and she tried to sit up. "Easy," Jake whispered, pressing a hand to her shoulder. "You're hurt bad." "You," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "Jake Morrison, you're supposed to be dead. Makes two of us." The sheriff's voice came closer. "She murdered a federal judge in Colorado, Morrison. Shot him dead in his own courtroom. There's a $1,000 bounty on her head." Jake studied Catherine's face, looking for the killer Crenshaw described. All he saw was exhaustion and pain, and something else, something that looked like relief. "Did you?" he asked quietly. Catherine's laugh was bitter as winter wind. "Judge Harrison. Yes, I killed him." Her eyes never left Jake's face. "He was the one who paid you to burn Willowbrook. Paid you to make sure there were no witnesses to what his mining company did to that town." The words hit Jake like bullets. She knew. After 15 years she still knew. "Your Honor," Crenshaw shouted, his patience wearing thin. "Open this door, or we'll break it down. You got 30 seconds. Catherine struggled to sit up, her hand clutching Jake's wrist with surprising strength. "They'll hang me," she said, "but not before they make me tell them everything I know about Willowbrook, about who really started those fires." Through the window, Jake could see Crenshaw's men dismounting, hands on their guns. 20 seconds, maybe less. "I have proof," Catherine whispered urgently. "Letters, payment records, everything that shows Judge Harrison hired you and 6 other men to burn out those families so his company could claim the land. I've been carrying it for 15 years, waiting for the right moment." 10 seconds. Jake looked at the door, then at Catherine, then at the gun hanging on his wall. 3 choices: let them take her and hope she kept quiet, fight 3 armed lawmen, and probably die, or Crenshaw's boot hit the door. "I'm coming," Jake called out, buying himself precious seconds. He moved to Catherine, helping her sit up fully. "Where's this proof?" She pointed to her coat, crumpled on the floor, sewn into the lining. "Everything's there. The contracts, the payment vouchers, even a letter from Harrison to his mining partners bragging about how clean the job was." Jake retrieved the coat, feeling the crinkle of hidden papers. "Why didn't you use this before? Why run for 15 years? Catherine's eyes filled with tears she was too tired to shed. "Because I was a coward. Because Harrison was a federal judge, and I was nobody. Because," her voice broke, "because I blamed you for Thomas's death, and I wanted you to suffer like I did." The door rattled under another impact. "But I saw Harrison's records," she continued. "The payments went out after Thomas died. You didn't know he was still in that building when you lit it, did you?" Jake's world tilted. "What?" "Thomas went back for something. A locket I'd given him. Harrison's men told him everyone was out, told him he had time." Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. "You thought the building was empty. They made sure you thought that." 15 years of guilt crashed down on Jake like an avalanche. 15 years of believing he'd murdered his own brother for money. His legs gave out, and he sank to his knees beside the bed. "I burned down that town," he said hoarsely. "I killed 37 people. You burned empty buildings for what you thought was insurance money," Catherine corrected. "Harrison's men made sure those buildings weren't empty. They wanted witnesses dead, wanted families destroyed so no one could challenge the mining claims later." Another crash against the door, this time wood splintered. Catherine reached out and touched Jake's face with her scarred hand. "I spent years hating you, but I was hating the wrong man, Morrison." Crenshaw's voice was right outside now. "Last chance. Jake looked at Catherine, really looked at her. The soft girl he'd known was gone, replaced by someone who'd survived 15 years of running, 15 years of carrying the truth about Willowbrook. Someone who'd finally found the courage to face her demons. Someone who'd come back to save him from his. "What do you want to do?" he asked. Catherine smiled for the first time since he'd found her, and for a moment, Jake saw an echo of the girl she'd been. "I want to finish what I started, but I can't do it alone." The door burst open, and Sheriff Crenshaw stepped inside with his gun drawn. Well, Crenshaw said, his eyes moving from Jake to Catherine. "Jake Morrison and the famous Catherine Henley. This is my lucky day." Jake stood slowly, positioning himself between the sheriff and Catherine. "She's hurt," Crenshaw. "Needs a doctor." "She needs a rope," Crenshaw replied. "But first she's going to tell me real nice about some other folks who might have been involved in her little crusade against Judge Harrison." That's when Jake understood. Crenshaw wasn't here for justice, he was here to clean up loose ends. Harrison might be dead, but his mining empire was still worth protecting. "You're working for them," Jake said. "The mining company." Crenshaw's smile was cold as the storm outside. "Harrison's death left some folks nervous. Can't have ladies like Miss Henley running around with wild stories about Willowbrook." Catherine's hand found the papers hidden in her coat lining. "Stories? Is that what you call documented proof of mass murder?" "I call it the ravings of a desperate woman," Crenshaw said. "Won't matter much once you're both dead. Tragic tale, fugitive kills innocent rancher, dies in the shootout with brave lawman." Jake's hand moved toward his gun, but Crenshaw was faster. The sheriff's Colt cleared leather and aimed steady at Jake's chest. "Real slow now," Crenshaw warned. That's when Catherine spoke, her voice carrying the strength of someone who'd found her purpose. "Sheriff, before you pull that trigger, you might want to know about the copies." Crenshaw's eyes narrowed. "What copies? Did you really think I'd carry the only evidence for 15 years without making copies?" Catherine laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "There's a set with the territorial governor, another with the federal marshal in Denver, and a third with the editor of the Rocky Mountain News." Jake watched Crenshaw's face change as the implications sank in. "All sealed with instructions to be opened if anything happens to me." Catherine continued, "You kill me, and by tomorrow morning, every newspaper from here to Washington will be printing the real story of Willowbrook." Crenshaw's gun wavered. "You're bluffing." Catherine pulled the papers from her coat and held them up. "Want to bet your employer's empire on it?" For a long moment the only sound was wind howling around the cabin. Then Crenshaw slowly lowered his gun. "Get out," Jake said quietly. "All of you, and tell whoever sent you that Catherine Henley isn't running anymore." After the lawman rode away, Jake and Catherine sat by the fire watching the flames dance. "What happens now?" Jake asked. "Now we go to Denver, we testify, we make sure Harrison's whole network burns down." Catherine looked at him. "Together." Jake nodded. "Together." Years later, when Catherine Henley Morrison stood on the porch of their ranch outside Denver, watching their children play in the yard, she would remember that night in the cabin. She would remember how sometimes salvation comes disguised as damnation, how sometimes the person you think is your enemy turns out to be the only one who can help you find your way home. And sometimes when the wind was just right, she could swear she heard her brother-in-law Thomas laughing in approval from wherever good souls go to rest. The truth had set them both free.